Okay, my name's Dziduch, aka Wreckage. I was born in Brisbane on the 1st of March 1959. I come from a 5-child family. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. A brother, sister, then myself.
Yep. You're the baby in your family?
Yeah. I was born in Brisbane, the Royal Women's Hospital in Brisbane. I grew up in Sandgate, and I'm living there again. This is the second time in my life that I've spent any real time there. I went to school there at the age of 14. I left Sandgate, moved to the inner city, and I moved back to Sandgate in 2001.
And is there something about Sandgate, you know, that...
Oh, yeah. People who live there tend to stay there. I knew that, and that's one of the reasons why you either love it or you hate it. I hated it when I was a kid, but it's good now. You know, it's good for me now. It's laid back. And,
so you wanted to get out as soon as you could?
Yeah, chomping at the bit. Yeah. You know, everything to me was in the city.
Yeah. Brisbane
of all things, yeah, but there seemed to be easier access to the world.
Yeah.
The only time I had access to live music in the early part of my life was probably like you, around 4 years old, at parties, and it was generally Eastern European music, gypsy music with the accordion, trumpet, big trumpets usually. And sometimes a guitar, definitely a mandolin. There was always a mandolin. And, you know, they were fairly impromptu, but everyone seemed to know the music. And to me, that was pretty fascinating. You know, they could all come in with their instruments, sit down, and away they'd go, you know, doing dance music. They all knew where each bar was, where the notes were, and the same music. And to me, that was really fascinating. No one in my family played music at all. Okay. My eldest brother, he plays, but it's his style. It's nothing that he would present to the world. It's just for him. It's very cerebral. For him, an instrument is cerebral, it's mathematical, and he works off that. You know. Just recently, a close friend of mine said they could hear, in the music that I'm playing now, they could hear that gypsy side of it, you know. The rhythms, I probably tend to take rhythms and divert them to my own style.
Thought?
Never conscious of it at all.
Really?
Never. No, I was a huge fan of rock and roll, and I never understood the connection between the old Eastern European music and rock and roll. But they were the same to me.
Yeah.
You know? I had the same fascination.
Yeah. They're very rhythmic, both rhythmic things.
Both very rhythmic, danceable.
Yeah.
You can sing any words to them. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, and everyone enjoys it, and people sing along. If it's a, you know, if there's sheet music to it, everyone seemed to know it. You know, it was.
And that's your family being part of a
whole social
cultural
group. Yeah.
And that is their family connections. Your parents, is it your father? You through your father we're talking about now. Yeah. And is that his siblings and cousins?
He had a sister who lived in Australia as well. They migrated around the same time.
Yep.
And this was just post-war. And one of her sons was a bass player with a rock band, and her youngest son played with the ABC orchestra, played violin. So I guess there is a musical connection there. That violin and bass was forced upon them by their Czech father, who was very highbrow.
And a forceful personality.
Very forceful.
Yeah. recently seeing you play, and now you saying that, I think, oh, that's really obvious.
Yeah, it was obvious.
Yeah,
wow, I never meant it to be, but it took me back, because these things, the music that I play now, I wouldn't call it rock and roll. Nowhere near it. It's not folk music. It's not anything. The only Western thing about it is the English. The English and
the language.
Yeah. The chords, I don't know where they come from.
No.
All the intonations are different. It's all organic, just comes from where I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I do know where it comes from. A very dark room, very dimly lit room, very late at night when the world's quiet, and that's when I come up with the best music.
Yeah,
I can talk to the elements, and whatever I feel, whatever comes out my fingers, it's all part of the atmosphere that I create for myself.
And is there a sense of like letting the day go or something? Or the responsibilities.
Yeah, last thing at night, it's like, some people like to have a drink before they go to bed, or a smoke or something. Me, it's playing music.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a couple of chords, to remember later, something I've been thinking about for hours or days even. We used to have the radio on. It was the first thing before going to school. The radio was always on, and there was that repetition of the Beatles. I fell in love with it. I remember when Love Me Do came out, and I probably could have screamed like a girl. And I was probably 5 years old, 6 years old, 1964, wasn't it? It was pretty late in Australia.
You would have been little.
Yeah, and I thought, wow. And I owned a harmonica, and I thought, hey, I can play that, and bang, it still comes out when I play the harp.
Yeah.
And, the rock and roll thing. I just loved music, I still remember. I can remember the weather on a certain day when I'd heard a certain piece of music,
Yep.
What my parents played it started to become alien as I got older.
Yeah.
It's a crazy language, crazy lyrics that I didn't understand. There was the huge drug element with my older brothers.
Yeah.
It was more bubblegummy with my sisters. And
it's kind of stereotypical, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I was sort of somewhere in between, like the Beach Boys. I really got into soul. I loved soul, the 2 or 3 chord rhythms that they have, the Smokey Robinson and, you name it. It all sounded great to me, I wish I could dance. There were those sort of weird shows like GTK, I think that would have been by 68, 69, 70. Look,
the GTK was that little 10
I've forgotten all their names, but I remember them. There was a connection with a lady who I call my babysitter. Now, this was a friend of the family's daughter. She was just great. She used to go on sojourns to King's Cross, and I never understood what it was about King's Cross. Why is there this suburb in Sydney that you always want to go to? As far as I know, she was a pink pussycat. And she actually went steady with Rusty Wiley for a short while, speaking of him. Ray Brown from Ray Brown and the Whispers, and she was like a groupie with the Aztecs.
Crikey.
Yeah, great girl. Great girl to have as a babysitter. Now, she'd dance around the house playing her records, you know, while she was looking after me, when my parents were out working, and I was sort of preschool age, so I digress here. But I remember meeting Ray Brown and thought, hey, wow, what an angle this guy's got, He was just great, And I went to one of the concerts. It was at the Brisbane Showgrounds. And they used to pack them out. you know, they really packed these places out.
And you were quite young then?
Oh, 6 years old.
Okay.
You know, I would have been 5, so it's preschool.
Yeah.
You know, if Rosie, which is her name, gorgeous name for a girl like that, Rosie. And so that was a great introduction to live music.
Well, that's my next question, you know.
Next
How
question.
does live music come into it? What sort of stuff did you go and see?
Well, it seemed to just go through my head and years went by. It was just I loved it. I just loved what was happening to the world. It was different every day.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you know, people in sort of cut off bell bottoms and pumpkin seeds as decoration, you know. It was great. And bare feet, you know.
Yeah.
These are things that were unheard of prior to that. And, you know, the music they were playing was just fantastic. And the instruments, God, the instruments just were so beautiful. It works of art.
Yeah.
There were a lot of local bands
Yeah.
because it was like, when I started playing music, late 76, it was only $10 a night, and you had it from 6 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and that was $10 to hire it. That was electricity, the use of all
like
that.
A hall or something.
It was a huge hall. It was a town hall because Sandgate was a town prior to amalgamating with Brisbane.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like a beachside getaway, even though the beach is mud and people didn't care, I guess. It was just
still
the
pretty
water.
exotic.
Yeah. People never, you know, never saw the sea except maybe once a year.
Yes.
You know, it was when they go on holidays to Sandgate.
Yeah.
And
So can you remember the names of any of the bands that you saw before you started playing, like while you were still a teenager?
Yeah, there was Captain Jack, which Tony Mockridge was.
He was. I think he was, yeah.
Guitarist. I went to see them a couple of times because my older sister, immediately older sister, her best friend used to go out with him. So, you know, whenever they were playing, I'd go and see them, and they sort of happened in Sandgate a few times.
Yeah.
Now, the wildest band I'd ever seen in my whole life were called the Howling Wolves. Now, these guys, this was, I was probably 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
Were just off the planet, obviously playing hyped up, drugged up Howling Wolf songs.
Okay.
But these are all white guys with long red hair, and they actually cut them into mohawks, which was just, whoa, you know. And they lived in one of the avenues in Sandgate, and they were like a pariah to the area. But I thought, these guys, you know, they've got it. These guys are something, you know.
And this is like sort of boogie or something.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It was like, you know, go back to the sort of middle of the Aztecs, you know. And, most people I know think that I'm crazy. Well, that type of stuff, the boogie and the blues.
Sorry, it's just the fridge or something.
But they were wild. I just remember them bouncing all over the stage and just making this great racket. And, you know, to me, that was something to support.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we had no real vision of our future. You know, we just took everything as it came. I remember when I was, I don't know, I must have been 3 or 4 years old. One of the things that stick in my mind, now I'll have to start with an accident, a pretty gruesome accident, but I think that's where it all stems from, where everything that I do now stems from. I hope I don't get too graphic here or freak anyone out in this interview. At some stage when I was a little boy, I must have been, I know it was my fourth Christmas. Prior to this Christmas, within a couple of weeks, I remember summertime in Brisbane, all the grass was long, and I used to lie in it and look at the clouds, and I don't know what I'd think about, you know. I remember just being out there late afternoon thinking, what a beautiful, beautiful day this is, being a kid, you know. It's almost over, go home, have dinner and, you know, do whatever, go to sleep. The next thing, my hands were twisted up in a push mower. Remember those old spinning rotor mowers?
Yeah, yeah.
Up to the middles of my arms. Twisted, just bang, inside these things, torn to ribbons. And I don't know what happened after that, but I remember being rushed off to hospital and blah, blah, blah. I was a pretty accident-prone kid. I was just, you know, I didn't worry about too much. You know, I'd been hit by a car before that. It actually ran over my legs. Of all things, you know. Don't know why I ran across the road. But anyway, here I was in the long grass and the push mower ran over my fingers. It was my best friend. Just thought it was funny, you know. He just thought it was a funny thing to do, to push it as close to my fingers as he could. But those rotor things, they just keep spinning and going on their own.
It's got a momentum.
Took my arms up, and my hands were bandaged like big hams, you know. And it ended up being Christmas. I came home from the hospital with all my fingers and hands bandaged up, and my dad thought, now what can I do for this kid? He bought me a £6 9-pence guitar.
Yeah.
And it still had the price tag on it. And I remember, wow, my dad spent that much on me. You know,
an acoustic guitar.
On an acoustic guitar.
Yeah,
it was all blonde, beautiful thing, little transfers on it. I thought it was the best thing that could ever happen.
Yeah, fantastic.
My brothers took it aside. Can I have a go? Can I have a go? Ring, 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 bang. You know, the strings break. You know, here, you can have it. By the time I was 7, in grade 2, I had this great teacher. Her name was Mrs. Wilson, and she used to spend a lot of time with each kid. It's probably the best teacher I ever had. You know, I appreciated it at the time. And she actually taught me how to tune a guitar by ear, so I could, you know, pick it up. I picked up an E, you know, boom, 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 boom. I could E and G together. I knew that sequence was, I would get it in tune, and then I could go from there. And that was probably the biggest breakthrough in my whole life. I could play Peter Gunn after that. These are things that, you know, don't think about until...
Well, maybe these things, you know, there's a whole range of things there, and some of them are about, you know...
Oh, the Howling Wolves. Man, I wish somebody else would have witnessed it apart from my sisters and their friends and things, you know.
And so do you think that's obviously a really strong memory for you?
The Mohawk to me was, wow, how could somebody do do that to themselves, you know? How do they get along in society?
And
when I write in particular, they're not things that are current. They're things that are in my memory, things that were, you know, things that I've dealt with. I don't know if it's obvious to other people, but it is to me. You know, it's something that's always there in my writing. I've written songs about my family, songs about friends, things that I've done, the feelings that I've had. You know, it's like, you know, I've been told, you know, you should write a song when you're really down. You're going to get a real blues song. You know, hey, it's probably true.
Yeah.
When you're really happy, you play a happy song.
Yeah.
You know, you write happy stuff. They all had an influence. Oh, yeah. I remember after that Howling Wolves thing, asking my sister, finding out about a band called the Velvet Underground. And she said, I don't want to listen to them, they're real shit. She thought they were the Velvet Underground from Newcastle or somewhere like that, who ended up being AC/DC, right? Okay. You know, they were originally called the Velvet Underground. Yeah. But I'm talking about the ones in New York. Yeah. It wasn't until like 1972, 73, and my brother pulls out an album. He said, hey, you got to listen to this. You know, this is from the guy who was up front in the Velvet Underground. I thought, oh, you're right. I don't know if it was Bon Scott, I think. Back then, back in those days.
Yeah.
This is Lou Reed. Have a listen to this.
Yes.
Here's boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
As she walked on down the street. No, like I just felt frost all over my body. Like, hey, this is it.
Yeah.
Berlin to me is one of my favourite Lou Reeds. I think firstly because he reckons he hated it, doesn't remember doing it, and he didn't like the atmosphere that was there.
It's a very dark kind of...
And I think David Bowie was flittering around doing his I'm the Boss routine.
Yeah.
Where do I go from here? As a professional musician or just an amateur?
No, I guess when you were young and the first time you ever got up in front of people, what was the feeling like?
It was great. I liked it. I felt humbled by applause. I was grateful that people listened to the music. I didn't sing as such. I was never been too confident in my lyrics. But now I'm getting older, I can present them and let anyone read them.
We don't care much when we get older what people
think. I know.
It's true.
That's true. That's very true. And I like the interpretations other people put on it because they see it in a different way.
Yeah.
To me, I might write something about something quite gruesome and they will turn it into something totally different.
And you've often had people singing your songs?
Yeah. With the Leftovers, with the Black Market, with the Crocodiles. And now Lovecraft.
Yeah.
That's great. I like to hear other people's experiences. And that's a really good one because I've often thought of that as a gimmick. Either using a mask.
Yeah. Well,
unintentionally, I have a collection of masks now.
Unintentionally.
I've never used them on stage.
I steal them from Mexican wrestlers.
My first experience with getting on stage, I mucked about a couple of times with a few sort of 60s bands. I think it's Survivors.
Yeah,
Jim Dixon and the guys, Greg and Bruce.
Bruce Anton.
And aside from that, we ended up being really good friends. We played together on the same bills.
Was there a Northern Suburbs connection with those guys?
No,
or not? You were in the city.
They were sort of, I think they were Sherwoody area or something like that. I'm not too sure. Alney maybe. But no, the connection was music.
Yeah.
They played great music and they could play it really well.
Yeah.
And Jim just had this great voice that he could pull it off. I think one of the best versions of, what's the name of it? It wasn't something by Eric Burdon, the Animals they used to do. It was just fantastic. It was better than Eric Burdon's. But anyway, I stepped up to as a volunteer to sing Hanky Panky by Bobby Fuller Ford. My baby does the hanky panky. I didn't know any other words because I'd forgotten them. Like you said, I'm mortified. It was easy getting up the stairs to the stage, but once on stage and a microphone in my hand, I knew I wasn't a singer.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Do you still go and see bands?
Yeah. Rare occasions, though, nowadays. We're getting old and frail and have my weaknesses.
I value my night times now too much to waste them on some punk.
Yeah, but you know what it is. When I do see a good band, I forget their names, which throws me into a bit of a dither at times.
Yep.
Which is a really bad foible on my part.
Perhaps for your birthday, I could get you a little notebook. And you
I've got a little notebook, but I never use the bloody thing. I've given it a go. I've tried to make it a better place. I've tried to, right from the very word go. Always tried. We started putting on our own gigs, which was a near impossibility for 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. It was hard, People look at you, go away. You don't want to hire this place, What for, And unfortunately, they get smashed up. 90% of the time it'd be the police knowing that the gig was on through little poster runs and things. We'd always leave these little A4 posters that we'd screen print and put them in really innocuous places, but where people would see them, and cops would finally see them, and they'd turn up, and a lot of the time there'd be windows smashed, toilets smashed, huge fights, and it'd be police. Yeah. They'd all come en masse, throw rocks from the outside. Yeah. So bang, as soon as there's damage to a building, we're criminals. Yeah. Which gave them an excuse to come in and rip the place apart. Now, punks in Brisbane, they weren't violent as such to begin with. We were just a bunch of fashion plates or something, you know.
It was all about the look.
It was. It was the look, you know. It looked pretty greasy and grim. But, being wild enough to look after yourself, but never aggressive. That type of punkdom didn't turn up till the sort of Scar days, and the skinhead movement moved in and sort of melded somehow into it. You know, but punk to me was totally different to that culture. Yeah. And we were thrown in with it all. Yeah. You know, the venue owners eventually over the years sided with the authorities. Oh yeah, you know, these guys are really violent. We don't want them in our venues anymore. They don't drink. They're always taking drugs and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. You know, they turn up and have a lemonade and then they leave at the end of the night. You know exactly what? Like we've got to have patrons. So let's turn it into a family cafe. Yeah, you know,
that'll work.
That'll work. That'll make us money in the middle of the city, for God's sake.
And so,
any way that we could play, we would. It didn't really matter. We'd always hook up with somebody else who had a similar idea, and we'd all bone in together with the cash, and we'd see what we could do. Yeah. And they often turned into fairly successful little ventures. But the Leftovers, for example, began in 1976 as a fully blown band, you know, end of 1976. We had a dozen songs we could play fairly confidently. You know, the other guys in the band were music makers as well. And Warren wasn't so much a singer, he just liked to sing, you know, sing and scream his heart out and abuse people, and that was a good way of doing it. Letting his opinion be heard, and we had to teach Glenn, and the only music that he knew to play on bass, Glenn was our bass player, was what we showed him. Yep. But he just appreciated music as it was. He could dance. He used to jiggle around to the Supremes and things. Yeah. You know, just brilliant. So he had that touch of the Sandgate muso in him as well. And we were all outsiders, you know. We'd all been expelled from our schools at different stages. We were all around the same age. And we had real instruments, and which made a huge difference. And moved into the city, I felt more at home.
You know, did you find other outsiders?
Yeah, it was easy to find them. You know, see people, you know, it's very similar, and you just start talking, and we all, you know, we gravitated. There was definite gravitational pull. Apart from the human subject matter.
Human?
Yeah, like the people you write about. There's a lot of that Sandgate Brisbane dirt in it, in what I write. You know, there's the Sandgate swamp, it's there. It's something I can't get away from. Yeah. It's all part of it.
Do you want to talk about that a bit, that Sandgate swamp a bit? What do you think that is to you?
Well, it sort of cut us off in a way. It was like a physical barrier between our world and the world outside. There's a Brisbane sound which is quite obvious. I don't know if it was the studios or whoever set them up or whoever the engineers were or whatever, but there was a flavour that sort of had a bit of namby-pambiness to it. To me, it was namby-pamby, you know.
How would you explain that? Like, what do you mean by namby-pamby?
It was a bit prissy. It didn't have the guts that rock and roll, to me, should have. You know, there's all those years. There's 1950 to me. Let's say from 1959, hearing it as a baby, to when I'm say 20 years old, and I hear the first JFK and the Cuban Crisis. And think, oh, that's the same engineer, or that's the same studio as Ding Dong did a year ago.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it has the same. I don't know whether it was they all used Stratocasters or they all used Voxes or something.
It's a small. You just got out of jail, I think.
Yeah. 89, 90.
Yeah,
that was a pretty rough thing.
That was you had a weird few years.
Yeah, it was a beat up.
Yes, I remember the story vividly. You told me the story. It's still very vivid in my mind. The description of trying to get back home and the guy and all of that. The bitumen, the whole thing is still.
Bitumen's very hard to have your head crushed into time and time again with a huge fist behind it.
Yeah. Anyway, we won't talk about that. Let that go.
No, not the face. Not the face.
Just getting back to
where were we there?
Well, I was talking about whether
the dirt.
You were talking about the dirt, Sandgate dirt. You know.
Yeah.
That's good.
And the namby-pamby. They were all probably another thing. They were all probably. Had the same gear as well, because you know studio gear in those days was rare as hen's teeth.
It was a swampy place.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's all day. It seems to be hot, you know. But there's the ocean breeze, which it helps.
By wetlands and
it helps you stay sane. That's all it does. At night time, there's bats and possums, and it's everywhere.
And do you feel like that stuff, the breeze, the bats, the possums, the swamp?
It's all in the music.
Is it in your music?
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. One of the songs that Wendy wrote, it actually describes that muddy, dirt, black crap that we crawled out of to get away from the place, and it's so ingrained in her that she's still writing about it today.
Yeah,
you know?
And she's in her 50s, probably nearly.
Yeah, she's in her 50s. Yeah.
All right, and do you think that I'll just move away from that now?
Okay.
Kind of just ask this very broad question: Do you think that if Brisbane has a culture? And I don't know the answer to that, whether it does or it doesn't. Is music part of it? Is this a musical place?
I feel it's more underground. I've always called it an underground. There's no industry here, not for us. You know, I don't feel it. I don't get paid for what I do. When I do, it's Christmas. You know, I can afford new strings, or if it's a good enough payment, I might be able to put a down payment on the guitar I've been ogling over for the last few years. But I don't do it for money. I do it just for the love of playing music. I've got something to say. I don't know what it is. Even after all these years, 50 odd years, I still don't know what it is I'm trying to say. But I'm glad people stop and listen. And
do you think
it's worth the money I spend on it?
Yes. Yeah. You don't begrudge it.
No.
As we were driving here, though, you know, we were talking about how you know, Brisbane was a bit of a backwater when we were growing up, and even though it's much bigger now than then, possibly twice the size.
Oh, it'd have to
it's
be.
not necessarily any more culturally sophisticated or...
No, open-mindedness is the word that we're using. Yeah.
Do you want to just talk about that for a second?
What
do you think about Brisbane as a place that has a culture? What's its culture like?
Its culture is very two-faced, I think. You know, everyone you know without putting a kibosh on everything, but Brisbane's... the people here tend to take a hell of a lot of drugs. They don't like the world that they live in, but they're different during the day to the way they live at night. But there's still that there's still that straight up and down, yes sir, yes ma'am, doing the right thing, being a good citizen, sort of flavour to everything that they do. They believe the propaganda, and if they stray out of that, the police will take care of the situation. I don't remember too many times in my life that I've seen any relaxation in the police state in Queensland, especially Brisbane. There's a world out there, and they all live in blue uniforms, and they think the world is just writhing in crime, and they're going to fix it up.
Yeah.
And I witness it every day. It's kept in the dark, but I think because I've been on the wrong side of it a few times, I feel that I see it. I actually see it. I see people getting frisked. They're not being mugged, they're being frisked, and they're being asked questions, and they're very prying types of questions. And I'd love to say something, but one man can't do much. I'm not going to put myself in that position because no one will ever do it for me, and I know that.
Yeah.
They probably wouldn't piss on me if I was on fire, but I don't care. I don't care. I live in my world, and that's the sort of an underground world. I don't play very often. When I do, we try to make it the best that we possibly can, make it a social event. We don't tour because this is something that I think belongs here. I'm not the only one. There are other people out doing similar things, with their styles of music, but they all seem to come back to a type of defiance or some sort of personal rebellion. These are people from all different walks of life, and but they all seem to have that ingrown punk thing. It's like they can't get that suit off.
Yeah. It sounds frustrating.
It is. It's no, like I said, there's no industry in places like Europe or some of the bigger cities in Europe or whatever. I guess anywhere in the States, bands seem to make it, and the first place they start is in daggy little pubs here. A daggy little pub is the start and finish of your career. You don't wiggle out of that one. Usually some bar manager might take you on as a manager, but not here. They won't deal with that. They'd rather put pokies in. They don't care about live music. They like to hear the tinkle of money. And that's their beef.
So you think do you think it's just not a very musical place?
No, not really. No, the propaganda, like I said, whenever a band comes from outside, they put them on in the biggest venues, and they say, the local authorities have done this for you, please accept. Behold and be beholden. And they do it. With their kids, they take their kids.
Be thankful for Wickety Whack.
Look at this daggy mob. When you grow up, you could be one of them. I'm lucky. I have my own personal roustabout who tells people. It's not his. It's his choice. I have sons. My eldest son's a musician, and he's made people aware of the music and the effort that we've put in, as little as it is. But
are you a big influence on him musically, do you think?
I must have been, but I don't recall it.
No, but I mean, when you look at him now, do you sort of think, oh yeah, I can see my music in him. Do you see your music in young people? Not just your son. But yes, I do. This particular generation who are about 24, 25 to maybe mid-30s, so that's 20 years past my group. And they seem to have that will to
not so much shove it down people's necks, but make them understand what the world's really doing to them, what it is. There's a whole generation of the logos, you know, these kids with no ambition, you know. It's lucky if they've got a job and they don't appreciate it. They could change their world if they wanted to. They could, you know, they could change it. Yeah. Anyone can change the situation. You know, I found that probably the thousands of people that I've met over the years within, let's call it a clique, because you can't really call it anything else, in Brisbane, the effort has been lost through those earlier generations, and it's being sort of kicked up the arse again by another generation. It's the whole retro thing. They're learning something new, you know. They've got the clothes style, they've got, you know, it's shocking. They try to be shocking as much as we used to be. Yeah.
Shocking for shocking's sake.
For shocking's sake, yeah.
Right, to upset the status
quo. I do
quo.
Go home. I do have a mother and father, and they love me.
Yes, that's right.
That I like to wear Doc Martens with the toes cut off. You know, so what?
And do you think they know who you are?
No, but once they do, I think they're grateful. The name rings a lot of bells, but no pictures pop into their heads.
Yeah, sure.
Or it's, you know, such and such. Well, isn't it a small world? You are from, who's that lot? The takeaway dinners or something?
Yeah.
Apart from the fact about payments, after about 2 years, we put a lot of money into buying equipment, travelling to gigs and playing. We wouldn't just play one set, we'd be there all bloody night, you know, banging away. Yeah. And you know, making every song 15 minutes, you know, without having a lead solo.
It's like the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
It's like that, you know, rawhide thing.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you a short story.
Yes.
You know, the whole punk thing, when it started getting violent, we had just released our singles, so people were aware that our music was out there. There was one particular group, without mentioning names, had a bunch of fans who thought, these guys have got to go, us, the leftovers. And they did everything they could to make our lives miserable whenever we played. We played a song from our first single, and Warren, who was our singer, brought it to everyone's attention. You know, we've just released this, I hope you go out and buy it, blah, blah, blah. We were, you know, trying to be commercial because this was our big bucks, you know. And I went into the first, it started with a short drum solo, a riff, a drum riff. But both my arms were extended. Out of the darkness came a china dinner plate. It just whisked past my head, and from somewhere over the side, a beer can caught me right, full, opened but unfinished beer can caught me in the side of the head. And, you know, we didn't have bouncers. We didn't think, well, we don't need bouncers. We'll deal with all this ourselves.
Well, it was all among friends.
Yeah, but hey, you know, that was the type of thing that used to go on. And then we were robbed at the end of it all anyway, and it happened almost every time we played, you know.
By
the people who were running the show.
Right.
No, different. You know, the promoters, the pub owners, they'd all get their hands in, you know.
Here in Brisbane?
In Brisbane, always, everywhere we went. And, you know, I don't have enough fingers to count. You know? But, you know, they'd all rob us. So I thought, I'm not going to stand for this anymore. I'm going to do something about it. So a close friend of ours who was running one of the shows kept on avoiding me. You know, you're going to get the money tonight. Oh, no, not again, not me. So I thought, I'm going to make this very easy for him. I stole their antique cash register and refused to give it up until the money turned up. It was amazing how quickly that money turned up.
You don't have to name any names.
No.
After we turn the camera off, you can tell me.
Yeah. But, that was the little story I wanted to tell.
Good.
Yeah, things changed very quickly.
They did, didn't they?
And I didn't realise how much money they robbed us for.
Right.
It was quite a bit.
Yeah. Yes, it's a terrible thing because you don't know how life could have been different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And maybe
we could have eaten.
Yeah, that's right. Just for that little few years, you know? Just the little window of opportunity.
That's right.